We returned to London in mid-February of 1455. The frigid air strikes like a whip outside, winter in full force now, chilling to the bone as inches of snow are starting to pile up outside, day by day. Moving through the city, we see the anguished faces of the mortals, their heads turned down and away from the cold wind, walking the frosted streets. The most well-walked paths create channels through the snow. And we arrive at the Chamberlain estate once more. Moving inside, and we see the study of Thomas Chamberlain, with the very low fire going in the hearth. The study is still quite cold with this paltry fire, but the 4 members of the Gauntlet sitting within do not feel any discomfort from the cold growing on their dead and pristine skin. So you all have returned from your brief meeting with Prince Ragna, having caught her on the way out from Westminster Palace, and apparently with plans to truly return to York now. War looms ever closer, but for the hope of negotiation, which was sparked at your meeting. As you all find a comfortable position in this well-appointed but freezing room, I leave the scene to you to reconvene and discuss.
We traveled with all the men here, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Did we lose anyone on the way?
No, they're a hearty lot. Everyone made it with all their fingers and toes attached.
Then I suppose we can chalk this up to a success.
For at least phase 1.
I think I'd rather leave the men behind for this next journey. They slow us down a good bit. It's far too expensive to pile everyone onto a ship.
I don't disagree with you there. Perhaps a few trusted men, but not a cadre like we've been traveling with. Why have you not yet decided to take a ghoul, Thomas?
I have Kasim.
Oh, he is yours then.
For quite some time, in fact.
Would you leave him here?
He manages the household. Also sees to certain matters of stewardship when I can't be here. Quite a number of affairs, in fact.
Even so, to have a ghoul and to make him a major domo seems most unfortunate.
How is that?
They have talents we can use, otherwise we would. But I suppose if Cassini's only talent is watching a house, he shrugs. That's for you to decide.
Sometimes an individual's talent is in management of people.
What kind of codswallop is that?
Stewardship in the art of seneschal is no small resource.
We'll agree to disagree. In the meanwhile, what exactly are we doing here again?
We can't very well set out again this evening, and I thought perhaps we might confer, decide where to go from here. I know Robert wishes to go to Canterbury. I know that you and Elined would like to stop off outside of Bath. But we all need to end up in Chester.
That we do, and Chester has priority right now. As much as I would like to conclude our research, well, there are more dangerous things at work here.
Quite.
So once we reach Canterbury, how shall we proceed? Or Chester, he said, not Canterbury. Too many C's.
We come back to a question I've posed several times. Whom do we support?
I know damn well who you're going to support, the way you were falling backwards over her.
One of these days you'll learn to read me better.
For a moment there, it looked like you were almost ready to kiss her unmentionables.
Well, if you were convinced, hopefully so was she.
A ruse, then.
It pays to be polite. It pays to offer due respect to those who believe they've earned it.
But you lied. That's not very respectful.
I showed due respect. I gave her what she thought she had earned.
You are a tricky bastard.
Tom grins, a little self-satisfied.
Robert, you've been awfully silent.
Yes. I wonder. Is choosing a side necessary?
It is more of a fallback in case things go from bad to worse.
When this eventually devolves into combat, it will fall to us to swing the sword that fells one of them. I would rather know where we stand before that moment comes, rather than when it comes.
Do we think Ragna will ever be the aggressor?
She has it in her, but her position is secure. I very much doubt that she will seek to antagonize Barbaros any further than she already has. And I very much doubt that she will initiate aggression.
And Barbaros's power is not his own. He is being controlled by other sources.
We suspect.
I would much rather there be a prince that is acting of their own accord rather than a prince that is a puppet.
Did I not tell you that I had cause to meet with a Tremere regent who was very surprised to hear the name Tredian Swift mentioned in association with her house?
You have, yes.
Surprise doesn't befit them. They tend to like to know who's who. I have reason to believe she's sought information on the man and may have taken action on what she found.
Then perhaps he won't be concerned for much longer. He's far too close to the prince's ear for my taste.
And now I'm going to say something that you are not going to like very much, Cormac.
Pretty much everything that comes out of your mouth. But go ahead.
If he cannot be replaced, we may have to support Barbaros.
You're right, I don't like it. In our greatest need, he refused us aid. But you expect me to give it to him?
Is that not the mark of nobility?
Fuck nobility. What about friendship?
He's an elder Canaanite. He doesn't have friends.
That's not what I mean. Cormac turns away towards the fire.
Now we go about soothing tension between these two. Speak mainly of Barbaros.
We begin with Barbaros precisely the same way that we began with Ragnar. Find out what it will take to bring him to the table, and gain any assurances we can to help entreat Ragnar to arrive in a favorable disposition.
I have a question. Cormac says, still turned away. If this feud has been going on for over millennia, why is it now suddenly coming to a head like this? Over a childish argument? I don't think so.
Barbaros believes that Ragnar had something to do with the fall of Jean-Marc.
Do you?
I wouldn't put it past her, but I don't have any evidence to confirm.
That is the problem. Lack of evidence.
And why exactly would Barbaros care so much anyway? Or are they the best of friends?
I think Barbaros and Jean-Marc were conspiring in some way before Jean-Marc was killed.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
And if true, it would have lent weight to Jean-Marc's paranoia. Something I expect he would have spoken at length with Barbaros about. And Barbaros, easily swayed as he is, would have been quickly convinced that someone was in fact out to get him now, as well.
As muddy as these waters have become, it does make sense. Either that, or he's...
Sorry, you cut out after either that or...
Either that, or he's trying to cover for himself.
All plausible. He does have contact with Ireland on a regular basis. He might have made allies with the Witch of the Connacht, sought out one of her kin.
There's not a chance. I can't tell you why I know that, but I do.
It's also possible that the princes are correct, and the Anarchs have in fact managed to sway one of such creature to their cause.
Cormac just shrugs and drums his fingers on the mantelpiece.
A worrying thought, if there is any weight behind it.
So do we carry on as planned, and wend our way from here to Canterbury, Bath, and then Chester? Or do we make straight for Chester?
A part of me wonders if the princes would be willing to set aside rivalries if a more imminent threat was presented.
You have your answer already. A more imminent threat is presenting itself. There are bands of Anarchs roving across the land, and yet Barbaros and Ragnar still fan the flames of a petty millennia-old feud.
A threat to be sure, but I don't think it's one that all the princes are convinced of being of the utmost importance.
Now here's an interesting thought. If Barbaros is right, and Ragna did commit some heinous act, why should she be willing to come to a negotiating table to sue for peace at all? More than that, why would he even entertain the notion?
This is why I mentioned Chester has priority. I feel it would take much more time to convince him.
Well, let's Elined's vote for Chester then. I throw mine in as well. Bath can wait.
As unfortunate as it is.
Agreed.
Thomas looks questioningly at Robert.
Yes, I already have an agent in Canterbury. I suspect it would not take long to achieve what I need there. Perhaps you can start getting Barbaros warmed up. And I'll simply meet you there.
If you'll recall, we were admonished against splitting up.
Yes, I recall there was concerns. But we were also suggested by others to not focus all of our efforts into one location.
I tend to find...
You are one of our more social people. You not being there for the negotiation will hinder things.
If only we could find a quick path from Canterbury to Chester.
We are in the dead of winter. There is no quick path to anything.
But there is more darkness.
Still, I better take care of business in Canterbury first. The distance from Chester to Canterbury would be far too long, and I fear the safety of my agent.
If you can't be convinced, then at the very least make it a very brief stay. Hopefully you won't be more than a few days behind us.
That is the plan.
Then I suppose we just have to do the best we can without you. Despite the fact that your presence would be a boon to us. If Barbaros was in league with your grandsire, you might be more apt to trust us if you were there.
What you say is true. I don't suppose you all would like to visit Canterbury first.
What exactly are you hoping to find there that's so important?
The link between the worshipful company and my grandsire.
But wasn't he in direct competition? The business interests he owned would be a thorn in their side at the very least. You heard what was said. The company of the stable is vastly rich.
Yes, but this is important information he would have liked to share with the council before his demise.
I notice you didn't say unfortunate.
Do not find ill will in those words where there are none.
Have you finally come around then?
I am still bound by a sense of honor to avenge my grandsire.
We couldn't hold that against you, could we?
Not at all. But vengeance does take its own toll.
I'm sure whatever lies in Canterbury will be very useful in the upcoming talks. At least that's what I hope.
Are there any maps in the room they're meeting in?
We'll say there are a few maps, yes.
Can I use them to see, since he wants to make his little detour, about what time we would both arrive in Chester if we ended up going our separate ways, since we're already deterring from the path?
Sure. Let me look here. So we're currently in London. London to Canterbury is approximately 60 miles east. So that would take you by land in the dead of winter, by carriage. Let's see. Probably about a week. It's pretty slow going. So a week east from London to Canterbury. And then you could take a ship going from Canterbury to Dover to the south. Take a ship around the south. And then back up to Liverpool, and that is a significant distance. Unfortunately, I'm lacking in nautical maps, but given the speed that ships go at, although given it is winter and the waters are not as forgiving, nor is the weather, could probably expect it to take, let's see, doing some back of the envelope math here. Consult my notes on travel. Cogs can average anywhere between 100 to 150 miles a day depending on the weather, and that can vary significantly. Probably about 8 days at sea in this time of year, and that's pretty crude, but around that. So 8 days from Dover back up to Liverpool, if everything goes very well. So if he spent no more than a single day in Canterbury, it would be over a fortnight before he got to Liverpool, and then maybe a day later before he got to Chester. Whereas if you left right now from London, circling around up to Liverpool and then to Chester, you'd probably be there in about 9 days. So a difference between about a week. You'd be at least a week behind. If he spends no more than a single day in Canterbury and everything goes perfectly, he'll be behind you by about a week. Anything less, and you could be expecting weeks longer, and that's, all of this is more than likely not to be ideal. So safely say probably a fortnight behind you.
Are you really willing to sacrifice a fortnight of time when things are already so tense?
I suppose it would not be too much of a hassle to simply get a boat back the way after concluding business in Chester. Very well. Since this is quite an important time, let us go speak with Barbaros first.
And that settles it, I think. Unless you, Thomas, have another idea.
I have no objections.
Alright, now that that's settled, I'm going to go out and find something to eat.
I'll join you.
Alright. So Cormac and Elined depart to do some hunting. And what will Robert and Thomas do with the remainder of their night?
Thomas is going to send word to Cassim to make arrangements for a ship to Chester. Well, Liverpool, but...
Okay. And Robert.
I was going to worry about Guy for a bit before he decides to go feeding to take his mind off of all the events.
Okay. So 3 of you depart to go hunt, and Thomas arranges to have transportation. How many men are you bringing with you?
We'll say 5. The
Okay.
rest he's going to direct to go, well, when the weather allows. He'll send the archers out to Edmonton to start training the villagers, because there are more of them. And archery is a relatively simple thing to learn compared to swordcraft.
And let's see what would be appropriate here. Don't have Hearth Wisdom. I'll let you make an intelligence seneschal roll, difficulty 8. This lack of Hearth Wisdom keeps coming back to bite you guys. Alright, 2 successes. Just based on your knowledge of having to run a household and more peripherally what it requires for peasants and serfs to maintain their own households, you think it's maybe a bit unrealistic that these peasants will have time in their day, 6 days out of the week, subsistence farming for their lord, to also practice archery.
It'll help them hunt.
You can send them. You can absolutely send them that way, but this occurs to you.
Well, they're not farming right now. It's winter.
That's true. They're mostly huddled up trying to endure the winter with what food stocks they've prepared for it.
Like I said, hunting.
Okay.
Obviously not going to command it, but look for volunteers. Hey, here's a trade you could use.
All right.
And here's a free bow.
So they're doing that, perhaps. Meanwhile, I will take... well, we'll say that given you're all... I don't think anyone here is starving. We'll say the remaining 3 of you can take 3 blood points each without needing any rolls, and as long as no one's getting too ambitious, it's pretty safe to hunt. And also the ghouls. Make sure I know. I assume that... Let's see. Get the names in front of me. I assume that Cormac, you're taking Gautier, and Elined, you're taking Gertrude along up to Chester.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. And Kazim remains here to organize. Okay. And you all set about making preparations and finish hunting, and we'll transition. Within a couple nights, Kazim arranges for travel for 5 of your retinue, along with the 2 ghouls and the group of you, the 4 of you. for passage on a ship from London up to Liverpool, intent on making your way to Chester. You have a mostly uneventful trip along the waters. Although the water is quite choppy and the wind is frigid, it takes more of an effect on your men and ghouls than any of you. After everything is said and done, it's about 10 days and nights before you finally arrive back in Chester. And it is now closer to mid or late February of 1455. Open up my notes for Chester again. Once again, you're greeted by the familiar sandstone, which is common in this area, and making your way through the gates, you find that this is a similar scene to London in that the cold is maybe even a bit worse this far north, and many of the people here are huddling up against the cold, kind of crouched over, moving here and there. It's not nearly as busy as it is in London. So your carriage comes in and is beginning to get stabled. It seems like Gautier and Gertrude are shivering quite a bit despite the layers of furs and linen they've packed onto themselves. You can see the air escape their lungs easily into the night. So the carriage gets set up and stabled, your horses put away, your 5 men determined to look stoic despite the freezing temperatures as the 4 of you depart from your carriage into the streets of Chester once more.
Well, first things first, they need to find some place for the ghouls to reside in so they don't get hypothermia. Not that we know what hypothermia is.
Are there any banthas to cut open? Oh wait, no. Wrong world. Yes, an inn sounds nice.
Yes, there are a few inns, and it's easy enough between your conjoined resources to put up housing for your 5 men, your 2 ghouls. Will the group of you be staying there as well, or shall you be trying to stay at the Chester Castle or elsewhere?
Not going to presume that Barbaros is going to be any more hospitable this time around.
Alright, it's easy enough to find some basement rooms as well, and so the 4 of you have pretty close proximity to the rest of your small retinue. And after a few hours, you're all settled in. Gertrude and Gautier come back to find the group of you after everything is kind of being set away. Gautier looks over to you, Cormac, as all of you seem to group back together. He's kind of rubbing his hands together. Even in this inn, it's still a little bit cool. Are we planning on doing more traveling, Lord de Courcy?
Not for a little while. Take some time to rest. Rebuild your strength.
Oh, thank Mary. These roads have not been easy, nor the waters. What are we doing here?
attempting to make peace. Peace in a shadow war that the kind will never see.
He looks concerned but nods. Gertrude looks over to Gautier, seeing this. It is best not to involve ourselves too much in these things. The less we know, the better.
Well, now he is a scholar and a curious one. I like to give as much as I can without overloading the poor boy.
What is Robert doing at this point?
Just staying close by.
And Elined?
She is remaining close by as well, though she is quite ready to head out and start this little diplomatic mission of theirs at a moment's notice.
My lady, if there's nothing else, I think I shall go and fetch meals for myself and Sir Gautier here.
Of course, and do your best to stay warm.
She smiles and nods a couple times, and then starts guiding Gautier away, who looks surprised and kind of bewildered. Leaving just the four of you.
Do you keep her in the dark on everything, Elined?
No, not everything. I let her know what is needed.
She seems quite conditioned to keep her mouth shut. I myself don't like that in a ghoul. I'd rather he question me.
You would be the exception then.
He might see something I don't. Any road, forgive me for questioning how you discipline your ghoul. It's none of my concern. Merely curiosity.
Of course, but she is quite bright herself. I'm more than certain she's able to pick up on things without me telling.
I would expect nothing less of someone you chose personally. And I am, after all, a new reg. I am always willing to accept advice. Gautier, you see, is my first ghoul. Other than a horse. Not this one.
Well, such advice is probably best left for other times. We do have business.
Indeed.
we do.
Alright, so the four of you meaning to make your way straight to the castle for presentation?
That was the intention.
Sounds fun.
All right. So you make your way back into these streets, cold as they are. They don't seem to bother you, these winds. You make your way back in the direction of the iconic red sandstone of Chester Castle, passing by the great cathedral, also bearing the similar reddish hue that seems to be most local to the area, Liqueurs at least. After some time with the guards and attendants needing to know who you are to be let in, you are eventually brought back into the Great Hall of Chester Castle, and again you see the triplicate of lion across the red banners. One of the ghoul attendants explains to you that the prince is indisposed, and it takes some time before you're finally met with the sound of steps on stone tile descending the staircase, and you see that Prince Barbaros has finally arrived almost an hour after you set out. He arrives, accompanied again by Magistrate Tredian Swift, almost in lockstep. The two of them enter the hall. Barbaros looks irritated, although that's come to be something of a default for him. Magistrate Tredian Swift, coming in behind him, maintains a stoic, dignified look, his nose a bit high in the air as he looks down all of you. Gauntlet Lords, what brings you to my hall again?
Your associates amongst the Covenant Council wished us to evaluate the humors between you and Lady Ragna.
I think our humors were quite clear at the last meeting. Nothing has changed. If Ragnar decides to be a fool, I shall respond. Though I suspect, given the events of London and late, she is unlikely to do so.
Furthermore, they would like to see whatever conflict blazes between the two of you quit and laid to rest. We would deeply appreciate being able to sue for peace between the two households.
Is Ragnar, who has perpetuated this for over a century now. She has always been bitter of how things ended. And it is she who will perpetrate this. Perhaps it is she you should speak to.
We have in fact spoken to her. She has agreed to a parley.
He narrows his eyes at you. Tradian Swift also looks curious, his head tilting ever so slightly. A parley. That witch wishes to speak with me. Surely it is a trap.
I cannot speak for her motivations. But to show our goodwill, I would volunteer my manor as the location of these proceedings.
His eyes widen slightly, and a smirk formed on his face. I see what this is. The Duke of York's position has been weakened in London. His influence is stripped. She is fearful. I could have guessed such. Kind of nods to himself, looking off. Of course she would seek to parley now.
Is it not also plausible that she has so many interests before her, she would rather not be concerned about an old grudge?
The timing is not convenient, nor does it support your theory, Lord Chamberlain.
It also doesn't disprove it either.
No. He kind of shakes his head as he starts to pace in thought, and he kind of raises his hand up. She is fearful. She is fearful because of her weakened position. He kind of strokes at his beard and Did she provide you any terms?
She agreed to attend. She made no request for any assurances from you. Equal terms. And as I said, the Gauntlet itself will provide security within Ambrose's domain.
Weaker still. I'm almost embarrassed for her to make such a request.
She does not make such a request. The Covenant does.
His smile fades. Surely the Covenant seeks a secure and stable England. And they shall have one. When Ragnar has learned her place, I think.
Conflict between York and Chester is not ideal.
Few things are ideal in this world, Lord Chamberlain. It is the world we must endure, and make the best of. The tide turns in my favor, and now Ragnar seeks to parley.
Let us presume that you are correct, and that she is fearful. Even a frightened bear can kill a man. But let us presume that you are in fact incorrect, and you seek to press an advantage that is not present. What then?
Then it shall be costly for her, at the very least.
More so for you. More so still for the rest of England. That is not a cost England should have to pay, nor would the Covenant choose for you to decide to pay it.
I maintain my borders, Lord Chamberlain. I will not be vilified for protecting it. If Ragnar seeks some parley before any struck has been commenced, then it betrays her own thoughts on violence.
She said very much the same about you, and about her own borders.
And what of the rest of you? Did you all just come here to listen to him and gawk? He looks across the rest of the Gauntlet.
Thomas bows a bit and steps out of their way.
I am curious what the issue of contention is.
The issue of contention is that she has implicitly threatened my unlife and my lands. And more explicitly, her riders have come through my borders and threatened them more overtly. And I will not tolerate this indefinitely.
Are you certain that they are hers, or could it be a third party masquerading as the other side to rise tension?
Yes, when did this first start?
You should learn your history, boy. This has been going on for a century now. Even before we each held praxis. There has not been goodwill between the two of us for some time.
I think he means about the riders.
The most recent were in the last year. One of them was stopped. An emblem was ripped. An emblem bearing the white rose of the York. Not idly do those fall from riders, sacking my villages.
In the last year.
And has a force been sent from you in response?
I had Sir Isaac Lavelle patrol the lands. To no avail, he has found none that remained. I am not fool enough to trudge through the Pennines.
So any claims that Ragna is protecting her borders would be false if she mentioned your men invading her land.
Her claims are false as her men invade my land. I have sent none to hers. You would notice. And at that meeting she attempted to lay the loss of the late Jean-Marc at my feet. Despicable. She would have me guilty of more crimes than I am guilty of, so that she could wage her war. But I suspect now, in this state of weakness, she thinks her words foolish.
The timing of Jean-Marc's demise was unfortunate given your proximity at the time. I am curious, though, what was discussed.
He sought an ally as he was persecuted, unfairly. We barely spoke a night before he departed.
My grandsires say where he was going.
Alas, he did not. It was the last time I spoke with him or saw him. I promised aid in whatever conflict he expected to have with Ambrose. I saw it as an injustice, and now I feel the same injustice being persecuted by Ragnar.
That is unfortunate.
More so because it is our belief that Jean-Marc was, in fact, justified in his paranoia.
If I held the financial resources of the entire merchant of the staple, I would be more paranoid myself.
I mean to say that someone had planted those documents for us to find.
Perhaps not. In the end, what is important is a series of unfortunate events led to Jean-Marc being pointed at by Ambrose unfairly. And now I see a similar correlation, a constellation of events happening around myself. But I will not suffer the same fate. He tenses his fist at that.
And so you will not treat with Ragnar.
Give me in your best and most succinct explanation why I should, at this time of her weakness and her foolishness, her persecution, why should I lower myself to speak to something like that?
Succinctly, she is not weak. She may have a single resource fallen out of favor within the courts of England. It does not make her weak. Consider the size of York. Consider the size of her domain. Consider the number of nobles under the banner of the Duke of York. And then consider your own position relative to that.
I will have you make a charisma expression roll, difficulty 9. You betray your ignorance of the situation, Lord Chamberlain. All that stand with Ragnar stand with the Duke of York, and the Duke of York has been stripped of everything. Margaret of Anjou has seen to that. The Duke of York was her greatest weapon, and without that she is nothing. Enough of this, you have wasted enough of my time.
Should this come to conflict, it will have echoes throughout the country. It could very well spell the end of the Covenant itself.
I'll have you also make a Charisma Expression difficulty 9.
Spending willpower. That'd be 1 success.
He stares at you for a long time at your words. You seem not to think much of the Covenant if you believe it would fail so quickly, even among our conflict. Lady Varsingen.
No, I believe others will take more stakes than they already have and try to gain areas and powers from themselves based on the chaos that would ensue.
You speak some truth in that the Covenant certainly will suffer, perhaps even England. But as an arrow through the shoulder may yet weep blood and be great pain, it shall not end a man's life.
My lord, have you forgotten the rebels that ravage the countryside? Internal conflict amongst the Covenant would be just the excuse they need.
You as well will be making Charisma Expression difficulty 9.
Jiminy Christmas.
Oh, it's not a botch. No successes.
Yeah.
The Anarchs are nothing. Less than rats beneath our boots. They shall burn out as an ember in the night. We shan't even recall their existence. Any
And
meddling,
what? Sorry, I didn't interrupt him. Go ahead.
any meddling on their part shall be dispersed with quickly.
Your Grace, there is another problem, perhaps, that you do not see. The neonates, perhaps even in your own city, are restless. If the rebels present an alternative, they might take it. You do recall, perhaps, that I took place in the Great Riot some years ago. I know what it looks like when it's about to fall.
He grits his teeth, listening to you. All too well, do I recall. Should any neonate be fool enough to raise arms, I shall see they made an example of in my court.
What if it's 100 neonates?
Or 1,000.
Then they shall also burn! And his fangs extend, looking back to you, Thomas. He almost lunges at you, but stops short of it.
further still, there is a faction controlling the worshipful mercers.
His head cranes around from Thomas looking to you. What faction?
That is the difficult part. They are very thorough in covering their tracks. But they are supplying both yours and Ragna's armies. They wish nothing more than this conflict to come to a head.
The Mercer Company is a grand enterprise. Of course they shall benefit off of war. But your theory of some faction is quite a story, a far-fetched one at that.
Is it too far-fetched to believe that even you might be a pawn in the jihad? There are others older and wiser than you even, my prince.
He glares at you.
No offense, of course, and he'll bow.
I am not fool enough to think there are not those older than myself.
Still, at least if an attempt at parley was made before any rash alternatives were taken, it could give time for hands to be shown. Perhaps even the lies within Ragna's side could be brought to light.
And a charisma expression difficulty 9 from you. What are your specialties? It's pretty important.
For expression,
Courtly, etiquette, and
conversation.
conversation.
That was one of the options, yep.
Unless you can make a really good case for that, I'm gonna say no. So 0 successes. He looks to you, his fangs have retracted. He still looks angry, but not fuming. After looking to you in turn, he kind of addresses you all. I've heard your words, your reasoning. Some of it more sound than others. Ragnar seeks to parley, but I have heard not sufficient reason for myself to extend such grace to her. If there is not anything else, you have spent enough of my time this night.
At the very least,
I have
were
had
you
enough
to
from
attack?
you. He kind of turns to you and holds a hand up.
Tom will shrug.
We'll notify her of your decision, my prince.
He looks back to you after a moment of staring down Tom and nods before turning, his cape billowing, and he begins to depart, and the Magister following after with something of a faint smug smirk on his face as he trails after.
Well, that went about as well as I expected.
Indeed.
I
Robert
wish
will
it-
begin leaving.
I wish I could say I disagreed.
Perhaps I just expected a lot less. So I wasn't disappointed.
Unfortunate.
Did you see the way that Swift was grinning at us like a mule's arse?
Yes, I did.
And I hope you can hear me, you bastard! He'll yell at the empty hall.
One almost wonders if he's not in league with the Mercers, whispering their honeyed words directly into Barbarossa's ear.
Either way, we settled what we came here to try to do.
I wasn't wrong, though, was I?
No.
In postulating that we're all being manipulated here.
No.
That's good. I was beginning to think I was being paranoid.
It's not paranoia if someone actually is manipulating.
What if those documents were planted? It still seems to me we got them too easily.
That was precisely my thought.
And now we could have started something we can't finish.
Or can we?
We'll certainly not stand on a battlefield between two warring princes with our arms out.
No, but we might make a visit to Ireland, since we're here.
You still wish to pursue that course?
Did I ever give any indication that I didn't?
I had hoped it was only a fancy.
I do serve England, after all.
England and Ireland are as far apart as two brothers can be.
True. What say we arrange a family reunion?
The greater problem here is once they go to war, what is going to be the excuse on the side of the
The Lancastrian-York conflict will come to a head. Percys and Nevilles have been feuding for some time.
More importantly, which side is going to try to recruit the Welsh people, given how recent our last rebellion was?
Given the proximity, I would expect the Lancastrians.
So I take it enough time has been spent here. When will we secure travel elsewhere?
The men aren't going to be happy. I thought we'd be here a bit longer.
We'll give them a few days. I mean to make for Ireland.
Are you sure we're not just chasing shadows?
No, but we've spent enough time chasing other ghosts. The whisper of a chance of solving this amicably without bloodshed has come and gone.
If you intend to go, of course I'll go with you. I assume, Robert, that you'll want to continue on to Canterbury.
You are correct in that.
And you, Elined?
I should likely go along with him, if only to make sure nothing tries to off him while he's alone.
So the Gauntlet becomes separated again. Despite what enough Memtet thinks.
Shall we arrange to meet in Bristol then?
It sounds reasonable. But travel will take some time, perhaps a month. A month to beat in Bristol, I mean.
It sounds reasonable. And, at the very worst, Kincaid hasn't been inhospitable. So if one of us happens to arrive early, I'm sure he won't chase us out with a stick.
Kincaid has really been nothing but enigmatic. It's hard to know what he's thinking.
Sounds like a plan then.
However, it is in our best interest to send a message to Ragnar as well, though. Since the Mercers were mentioned in this, discussion with Barbaros before, your contact could be in more danger than they were before.
Yes. Do not expect to stay here long.
How shall we get a message to her, without fear of it being intercepted?
Well, where we intend to go isn't that far off York, is it?
Canterbury is some several hundred miles from York. If you recall, it took us nearly 2 weeks by carriage, and you'll be further away in Canterbury.
True.
At any rate, I'd rather have this discussion outside of Barbaros's hall.
Of course.
Alright, soon enough, the group of you make your way and you're escorted out of the Great Hall beyond the gatehouse.
Then what shall we do with the next few days?
You can say that you've made your way outside the castle soon enough after being escorted out, and you're outside the moat and bailey beyond the gatehouse. So you are outside.
Well, to get the message there, the party could be split further than it was intentionally, though that has some inherent risk to it as well.
There is time, of course. Even mustering forces. It will take them months before they'd be ready to do anything of particular note.
Of course.
Once we've reconvened in Bristol, we could simply carry the message ourselves.
And hope greatly that it goes through in a manner that, well, much better than that.
I think it might also do us, since we'll have a few days here. Maybe to have a chat or two with a few of the locals. Same as we did in Lincoln. and he'll make meaningful eye contact with Cormac.
Cormac nods.
When we do go, if it's all the same to you, I'd appreciate it if you take them in with you, Elined. You'll be in much more hostile country than we.
Have you ever been to Ireland, my friend?
So far as I'm aware, there aren't 7 princes with 7 different motives in Ireland, at least 2 of whom are conspiring to unknown ends.
I don't know. It has been some time since I've been home.
I won't expect a grand welcome, as we might in a Covenant city, but I do expect them to uphold the Lex Autonomous.
We should receive a warm welcome in Dublin, at least. I was once seneschal to Prince Edward de Warenne. Out in the countryside, though, we're on our own.
I don't know that we'll be spending very much time out in the countryside, but we'll see.
Well, we have our plan, but we still don't know how we're getting a message to Ragna. I suppose we could stop in York ourselves, although it would delay us.
I had thought we might make the trip after we reconvened in Bristol, though if you were worried about the rider being waylaid and the message intercepted, I can see how that might play to our advantage, depending on whose eyes read.
So you want we should send the message by horse anyway?
Knowing that the risk of it being intercepted is very real, we can word it appropriately. Still convey the same message, but perhaps allude to certain inconsistencies a bit different.
I'm sure we can all rely on you to use your cunning and doublespeak. God knows you visited on us enough.
Alright, so the plan is to return to the inn. Thomas and Cormac will be departing for Ireland, Elined and Robert going towards Canterbury, and a horse messenger to deliver the message, perhaps vaguely, to Ragna.
Sounds about right.
Elined knows it is foolish, but she is considering taking the journey to deliver the message herself.
How long would it take to secure travel to Canterbury?
From here by ship?
Yes. Well, to get to Liverpool, and yeah,
Right.
pretty much the same way.
Yeah, about not that long from here to Liverpool, from Chester to Liverpool. And then the boat from Liverpool to Canterbury by way of Dover, obviously, would be about the same. You could expect anywhere between 7 to 10 days, probably 8 or 9, depending on weather and such.
So there will be a ship that will be available in Liverpool. How soon?
Ships often leave from Liverpool and make kind of these coastal trading routes, so it wouldn't be uncommon for a ship leaving from Liverpool bound for Bristol, and then from Bristol bound for like Portsmouth, where you were briefly before, and then Portsmouth to Dover or London. So they kind of make stops along the way. And if you just want to travel yourself and not like a retinue or a carriage or anything, then it would be pretty easy. You could probably reliably expect one to be there any night. If you need one specifically for ferrying, like a private charter ferry, it could take a couple nights.
Okay. And if we are bringing troops with us, we would want the private charter.
That's up to you. You have a carriage right now, right?
Sounds right.
So, all in all, you're probably looking at 10 days, 10 nights, I should say. And that'll put you right at the end of February. That's including your travel from Chester to Liverpool and your travel from Dover to Canterbury.
Alright.
And including your days waiting for a chartered ferry that could definitely take up your carriage and all of your men privately.
Well, Robert will at least mention he does want to get to know the court of Barbaros a bit better, so if Elined wants to go ahead and secure transport, he'll probably stay in Chester for a night or two.
Alright, and Elined is with this plan.
Yep, sure. Yes.
Alright. So Elined will depart for Liverpool to establish a chartered ferry to leave in a few nights, while Robert stays in Chester for a few nights, and Thomas and Cormac make to leave bound for Dublin. And on that, we will end the scene and pause here, since we are 2 hours in. We will come back in 15 minutes. So we return, looking back at the Great Hall at Chester Castle, sometime the next couple nights. And we see that the Chester Prince Barbaros is again entering from a side hall, accompanied as always by Tredian Swift, his magister. And a few minutes later, a figure enters from the main entrance, and we see that Robert de Vere has entered alone to speak. Barbaros folds his arms, looking at you, Robert. hope you are not here to waste more of my time, boy.
Depends on what one would call a waste.
Do not be coy, I do not have the patience for it now. Speak your mind.
Well, if you are too busy this night, perhaps another, but I would simply like to get to know you. You see, I've spent a long time in Ragna's court, but I have never been to yours.
I think you will find there is far less. Concerning hallway rumor and gossip, the Jihad is not so poisonously filled as it is in the court of York. The Canaanites of the city know better.
Is that true? You don't have any enemies around the corners, such as that place?
There are none in my city whom I am concerned with plotting against me. As I understand it, Ragnar's own child is a bit of a problem for her. And he smirks. Dorothy, I believe her name is, or some such.
Robert will raise an eyebrow at this. Indeed. Why, how did you come to this conclusion?
Just as I'm sure that Ragnar has her own informants, I have mine. I would be a fool not to know about her court and her city.
I see you have taken precautions.
Just so.
I wonder if your information is not somehow linked to your dear Magister.
Magister Tredian Swift raises an eyebrow, looking at you skeptically. The manner in which I gather my information is not of your concern, Gauntlet Lord.
No, but it would be quite a coincidence. But I suppose I don't need to speak more on this.
Why have you really come tonight? It is not to speak with me as though we are courting. What do you wish of me?
Well, my grandsire sought out your help, yes?
That he did. I'm afraid perhaps too late.
Aye. Very unfortunate. But perhaps I can make an offer to help you.
I'm listening, Lord Devere. He folds his arms again.
Perhaps I've already made minor influences, such as the Court of London. Perhaps Ragna found less support there after my doing.
He looks at you with some curiosity and a smirk. What interest do you have in undoing Ragna?
I suspect she is behind my grandsire's downfall. I was first traded under her care as a boon, but that was just to get my sire on her good side.
Prudent of you to see the threat in Ragna. Indeed, she very well may have played a very significant hand in your late grandsire. May he rest in peace.
Yes. Just know that you have an ally in me. Should things come to a head. She is well aware of her weakness, but she takes precautions to strengthen her position.
If you can offer me counsel into the specifics of her weaknesses, provide me guidance on what you have seen specifically, then perhaps there might be a reward for you, Lord de Vere. I reward those loyal to me, and in this conflict, I shall need more support. It is no question to any.
Well, yes, I would be available, though I cannot say offhand what counsel would be most useful at this time.
Who does she favor most and least? Who loves her and who loathes her? These are the things I would like to know more about. My information is outdated.
I'm sure you're aware of her bodyguard.
The mute, yes. Whatever.
Perhaps nothing more than what you already know. I am seeking how much you know about her court.
I know she is by some reputation to be some great warrior. I know little else.
Oh, she is very skilled, and her fighting style is very foreign. Alien to our lands.
Know you anything of her spy master, Sienna the Virgin?
Out of character, is that a character Robert knows?
Only because you spent time in New York, I'll let you make an intelligence politics roll, difficulty 8. This name has never been brought up to anyone publicly.
Okay.
Zero successes. You don't recall that name ever being mentioned before.
No, that is a name unknown to me.
Just no surprise. The name alone cost me greatly. Supposedly, someone in service to Ragnar. I know of almost nothing about them, except that they seem to be quite skilled at detecting her enemies. And the word spread about her.
Do you know more about this individual and clan?
Alas, this Sienna is very skilled, proficient at his or her trade. None of my contacts have ever witnessed this individual, and only one has heard the name. If I knew more about this Sienna, I suspect I could undo Ragnar much more efficaciously. But to chase this Sienna may be chasing a ghost. If you come across more information about Sienna or anything else concrete that I can use against her. He nods a couple times. You will find favor in my court. And I will see you protected against the Covenant. Should it come to that. I do have some rapport with them.
We are in agreement then.
He reaches his hand out.
And Robert will take his hand and shake it.
He smiles. He still manages to look angry even as he smiles. Somehow it must be the eyebrows. But he nods, letting go. I look forward to hearing more about this.
Robert nods. Oh, and before I depart, perhaps your Magister knows of any witches or druids that have the power to control plants.
Magister Tredian repositions himself, shifting his weight before putting his hands together, very scholarly. And he speaks, looking down his nose again. There are many who could command such force. Would need more specific details to ascertain what this might be.
Specific details. Well, the individual in question would be female.
They may appear female. It is not uncommon that those dabbling in this craft masquerade themselves as other. But again, just as likely it could be a female. There are kind with such powers.
I've heard rumors of a kind of such powers. Do you know anything more concrete?
There was a cabal of some magnitude in Kent, but they were all put to the fire by the church. To my knowledge, none of them commanded such forces. It is likely a dead end. The kind who command such forces are quite skilled in avoiding detection, with rare exception.
Why would one that has these abilities be traveling near Lincoln?
You suspect that this witch, or sorcerer, or sorceress was traveling through Lincoln, and this is the actor which slew your grandsire.
Valid doubt, yes. Looking at the battle site has unveiled much information, such as the trees came alive to attack, and they spared all the horses. Not a single one was harmed.
It is a very peculiar skill set, foreign, exotic. And for those powers to be revealed, regardless of the nature of whatever it was, the reason could be as simple as mercenary. Not coin, mind you. These types tend to dwell in a more ethereal and abstract currency. There may have been some bargain struck by someone for this individual to travel and perform the deed for some favor or boon of some kind. Perhaps a relic, perhaps a spirit, a tome, who can say? You will find that even those not amongst our kind who practice such things may engage in the mercenary practice just as easily, should the appropriate bartering item be found.
That is a very curious thing you've said. You know of Anafnatet, correct?
You want a moment? I'm afraid I am not familiar.
No?
Roll your perception empathy for that. Carry on.
Perhaps Prince Barbaros would be willing to tell you more. This one is quite close to the council.
He is some entity of enigmatic nature. None of us are quite sure what he is, but he commands some sorcerer's power. Of that we are certain. Very interesting. Well, I imagine he might know more than I would.
Well, when the deed was first done, he made mention of seeking out any sort of artifact or relic. I thought nothing much of it at the time, but it's curious you would at least say that.
I think it's only reasonable to conclude that if this was simply some kind of assassination for payment, the payment is likely made. You are unlikely to find anything there now, I'd wager.
Oh yes, I searched quite thoroughly for at least what he's mentioned. No luck there.
I wish I had more to give you, Lord de Vere, but I can't speak more on this with any certainty without more detail.
Would any detail be of help to you as I search my mind over the details that transpired?
Well, to begin with, if you could identify any unique mark or sign that might delineate this woman as belonging to a faction or coven, anything that could clarify her identity or nature, even. Without these things, it is, you are simply guessing in the dark.
Ah. And no, I have no such thing. What little I do have is mainly been psychic impressions left behind.
He nods. Then it is likely that whoever or whatever this is knew enough not to leave behind any evidence, which suggests, if nothing else, beyond being proficient, they are wise and wily. They anticipated, perhaps, some kind of investigation, which may, in itself, and he kind of looks off in thought, exclude the possibility that this was any chance event.
Well, this certainly is food for thought. I appreciate your time.
He bows his head. Do send word if you find anything more from me, Lord de Vere. Bid you a good evening.
Good evening.
And they again depart, as you are making your own way out, and you are also escorted outside the castle. And the scene fades. All right. Meanwhile, we will follow Thomas Chamberlain and Cormac de Courcy as they travel across the waters. And as I recall, Gautier is coming with you, but your 5 men have left with Elined. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right. It takes you a couple nights before you find a ship returning to Dublin from Liverpool, and a few more nights just due to bad weather before you arrive in the port of Dublin. And so it's still mid to late February when you enter the port of Dublin, and in this era, the eastern side of Ireland, the eastern coast really known as the Pale, is the Normanized kind of English-controlled, English-influence area of Ireland. And Cormac would know this best, that as he said before, outside of Dublin, along this eastern Norman coast, it's very foreign to native Englishmen. And the covenants reached does not extend here, at least as far as its protection. And you know that your status will not go as far. So the two of you, along with Gautier, step off the gangplank onto the docks of Dublin around midnight, and there are people working the docks. This is a growing port city, although it's not London, so it's not quite as busy. And Gautier looks a bit seasick. He's kind of a bit pale in the face and clutching at his stomach. He seems not to have handled all the travel so well.
Can you smell it, you two?
Oh, smells something, my lord. Oh, boy. Oh, Mary. He leans over a barrel, and you just hear the sound of him retching.
Boy doesn't have his sea legs.
It does take time.
I never acquired them myself. Spent most of my time studying, as I'm sure he has. All the same, I can smell it. The beautiful emerald Christmas of home.
Smells like a port.
To the untrained nose, perhaps.
To a nose familiar with ports.
Ah, yes, but you haven't tasted blood until you've tasted Irish blood. We are to a man full of the passion.
Thomas cocks an eye. Was that an offer?
It has been a long journey. I know a couple of great places we can go. If you don't mind getting yourself involved in a fight.
Never shied away from one in the past.
I knew I liked you for a reason.
I can think of at least two.
Come to think of it, though, our status won't mean as much here. Hunting another's domain would be frowned upon at best.
I'd expected as much. Shall we present first and feed after?
I should be happy to see Prince de Warren again.
Hopefully he is as happy to see you.
We left on good terms, but much can change over the years.
And there's no telling what he's been told about you.
He'd probably believe all of it. with that, Cormac is going to lead them both, all three of them, I should say, to the court of Prince de Warren. If it's still held in the same place. It hasn't been that long.
Alright. You begin walking off, making your way from the boardwalk with Gautier kind of staggering behind you, still not fully acclimated, but he seems to be doing better than he was on the ship. And you start going down a street, and I will have you both make a perception alertness, difficulty 8. Alright. So you're continuing along, and Cormac, you look behind you, behind yourself, back to Gautier for a moment, and Thomas, you're distracted by some noise, maybe the shattering of glass inside a tavern, and when you both look back to the direction you're going, you see that with surprising speed and subtlety, about 6 men have begun walking parallel in front of you and behind you and are closing the gap. And you see now that you seem to have been shadowed and now are being closed in and kind of guided, subtly escorted away by these 6 men. Not towards the court so much as down a dead-end street. Cormac, you realize you're not going toward the court anymore, as these men start to guide you away, or get in the way as you start to move in that direction. And you hear a voice from one of these men. You see that they're all very darkly clad in cloaks, hoods raised. Keep walking. No need to make a scene here. No violence will come to you. We need only speak.
Tom cocked an eye at Cormac. Friends of yours?
No friend of mine. Just a few brigands making a grave mistake, I think.
I'm happy to take them at their word until they break it.
I may as well. We'll follow you. Lead on.
Thank you, Lord de Courcy.
So you do know who I am.
He walks, continuing on quietly. There are now 8 in total. You see that they kind of come out of the alleyways. They've been growing perhaps in number over time, maybe since you landed or got off of the boardwalk. You're not sure when they started to coalesce, but there's a good number of them now, all dressed about the same, and here and there you catch the glint of steel under their cloaks. They seem to be armed.
It's an English accent. Bit odd for Dublin.
He doesn't respond to you, and you're led further down alleys and streets that have less and less light, until eventually you come to an area of town where the tenement buildings rise high, and there is very little light. It kind of dead ends into this back alley, this forgotten suburb that looks like it's not doing very well. And they give you a bit more space, as the one you caught the voice from turns, as the others kind of form a semicircle about you.
Tell us now, what is the meaning of this?
This man who is speaking begins to unwrap some of the cloth wrapped about his face underneath his hood. You recognize the man. You recognize Robert Dufour, the outlaw of the Covenant, as he pulls down the cloth and speaks up to you. Did not expect you to follow through. It seems I was brash in presuming so. Gauntlet Lord, we meet again.
I wonder if we're to see you, Master Dufour. I'm sure Master Chamberlain feels the same. We've been looking for you.
Here I was expecting to divert a shipment from going to Liverpool and steer it towards Southampton.
We know you have been looking for us. And you may still have a similar goal ahead of you, a task. We wished to see what your action would follow from the word that we had received. Now that you are here, it seems perhaps you are more than words. And perhaps our meeting at Maiden Castle was more than a chance meeting.
I've thought on it often.
Tell me, is De Warren giving you sanctuary in his city?
De Warren is not aware of any of our business. That is why you were escorted away before reaching his court. I apologize for the duplicity, but we had to know that you would come here in the expectation of a warm welcome. Unfortunately, De Warren is not among our supporters.
We can explain it away later on as seeking allies further afield.
He is as a victim as much as any of the Covenant's work. Best that he not be involved any more than he must. But as I said, the task yet lies ahead for you to prove your service, a commitment to our cause.
The Covenant is a poison. I'm sure you know that already. And they prove it more and more every time they meet.
He nods
And you-
once. Go ahead.
And you may or may not be aware, but the Covenant is in the process of breaking. There may be an opportunity in the not-too-distant future.
We had heard reports that there had been some fractious dealings among them, though unfortunately our assets are limited. We should focus you on the task at hand so that you may present yourself before any undue explanation is required. You were not mistaken in hearing that a ship is bound for Liverpool. Many ships are, often. One, in fact, in approximately 1 month's time from now, is carrying a great shipment of iron, oil, and wax. It's been paid for in advance by Prince Barbaros. That ship we mean to have taken.
I expect you already have individuals in place to achieve this.
Indeed. We had planned on committing this on our own. The ship is going to be directed towards the Isle of Man, where we have an outpost. Now understand, we are taking grave risk even by revealing that much to you. Though given your actions so far, it is believed by myself as well as others in our group that you are trusted enough with this.
Our risk is graver still for telling you all that we have already.
Indeed. What we speak of now is treason in its most poignant form. The Covenant could have all of us executed for even speaking the words.
In for a penny, in for a pound, then.
I must know, though, if you have the time, what is your plan for England? If the Covenant should fall.
All in due time, Lord de Courcy. I'm afraid, for now, we must build trust slowly. Do this for us, and the rest shall be explained. You can extend your faith that far. I do not expect you shall be disappointed with the rest.
A question, if I may.
He turns to you.
Just settle the dispute. Were any of your number complicit in the fall of Jean-Marc?
No, we were not. Though we are aware of the rumor. We have not dispelled the rumor, for it does seem to give strength to the fear in the princes.
That, at least, narrows the field of suspects to just two.
Jean-Marc was a victim of his own jihad. They all shall be soon enough. I would recommend you quit yourself of all of it. The sooner the better. Whatever fate he fell to, I would not take it upon yourself as your own concern anymore. Not after tonight. Not after this discussion. You have a new path now. One fraught with certainty of death, should you fail at any turn.
Sounds like just my kind of path.
Indeed, many of us shall likely perish before this has settled. But by the end, I believe the most righteous shall prevail over Lincoln, even from humble beginnings.
So if you already have men in place to divert the ship and a place for it to port, what do you need from us?
Evidence of your loyalty, Lord Chamberlain. Your commitment of this action is nothing less than an actionable offense against the Covenant. Indeed, it would be far safer for you to achieve this, given your status. The ship arriving in Dublin will be held by Covenant forces. They shall not expect one of the Gauntlet lords to be diverting it. Whereas our own assets would likely have to create much more of a scene.
barbarous is no friend to me. No friend to Dewarren either.
No. As I said, this is no slight to Dewarren. He has been paid in advance for the shipment, although the payment is paltry compared to what it is worth. Long has Dewarren been stolen of profits he is due, but unfortunately at this time he cannot fully benefit from our intervention.
Understood.
You must also reconcile that the entire crew on this ship may not survive, for if even a single one lets their tongue share that Lords Cormac and Thomas of the Gauntlet have turned traitor, the two of you shall be well hunted. Your estates seized, certainly. Your loved ones, your allies, interrogated or destroyed.
I have less to lose than you, Thomas. What say you?
I came here with my eyes open. None of this is shocking.
Then we will help you strike the first blow.
He nods again. As I said, 1 month's time. You shall be contacted again by one of us in the nights following with more instruction on the details. In the meantime, I recommend you do not give Edward cause for alarm.
I wouldn't dream of it. Are we to spend that month in Ireland?
You may spend it as you choose, so long as you are here in the nights preceding this shipment. I recommend, for the simplicity and reliability, that you remain. However, I understand your position does demand great flexibility.
Might as well play up the act then. Earnestly seek allies amongst the Irish Canaanites.
Do as you see fit. In just over a month's time, you shall be met at the Isle of Man by friends, and then the true work can begin.
Very well. We did not see you here.
He nods as he pulls his hood back over, and he begins to pass by you, and the 7 other figures that have been standing still as statues depart with him, leaving the 2 of you in this dead-end suburb of tall, dilapidated tenement buildings.
Well, it seems we've made our choice. We're knee-deep in it now.
I made my choice at Maiden Castle.
I was walking a very thin fence, I must say. But our meetings with Ragnar, you know, he doesn't want to say his name, have pushed me fully over the edge. DeMartinic's death was unfortunate but coincidental.
If anything else, it cemented my certainty. The reaction of the other Covenant princes did little to dissuade my choice of action.
What about the other 2?
I think Elined can see the writing on the wall, and if we can convince her that this would be the best way to minimize losses, I think she'll jump in.
And Robert, dear Robert.
Once we explained to him that the rebels had nothing to do with the demise of his grandsire, so long as we can convince him of it, I think he'll see the light. His grandsire was felled by someone else's hand for their own gain.
Do you still seek to search out the Witch of the Woods?
Maybe not right now.
He seems to relax a little bit, clearly on edge about the whole thing. Not so much what DeFore just told them, but going to meet the witch again, for sure. It is good to be a traitor again, he says, stretching. Ambrose will not be pleased.
Bella might, though.
He'll certainly get the tongues wagging.
I think she's probably more sympathetic than you think.
I'm not sure about that. The Covenant has been good to her.
We'll have to have a more lengthy discussion on that front later on. For now, moonlight is burning.
Yes, we should be on to the House of De Warren.
Alright. Two of you depart from this dead-end suburb back into the streets, and the scene fades on the two of you leaving. Alright. Meanwhile, we return to Elined and Robert. A few nights after their last meeting with the entire Gauntlet, Elined having sought to acquire a ferry and passage back down, back towards Dover, back to Canterbury. It's a total of about 10 days of travel, everything included. Kent, the county, is divided into two main areas, the Chalk Hill downlands and the low-lying coastal plains, the latter of which being more inhabited. Northern coast has these low and marshy areas with several notable islands, such as the Tannet and Sheppey, but the south coast, which you two pass by, has the high, impressive chalk cliffs of Castle Dover, the natural harbor of Richborough, which uses an existing Roman fort. The town of Dover has a massive and famous castle that you are witness to, overlooking the Dover Canal, facing France across the channel. It is known to have withstood French siege many times, and been a long and important strategic bulwark in past wars. Elined, you're very familiar with this castle, not just by legend of military history, but when you actually see it, the long white chalk cliffs that just erupt from the water toward this castle looking over it is majestic, as is its defensibility. It is also known to host the Maison Dieu, the House of God, which serves as the hospice for the wounded and destitute soldiers that you've been in many wars from. They've been sent to this area. But Dover is exceeded only in status by Canterbury, which you travel to after leaving Dover. Canterbury existing as the eminent religious center in all of England, dominated by the Archdiocese of Canterbury, and the Canterbury Cathedral at the heart of the Archdiocese. It is one of the oldest and most grand cathedrals in England, and many pilgrims come every year to visit the shrine of Thomas Becket. The city is sprawled beyond the walls, and the St. Augustine's Abbey and St. Gregory's Priory are beyond it. It reminds you a bit of London in that way, but the city's wealth is overshadowed by its faith, and even approaching the city as your carriage draws forward and closer, it begins to make you physically ill. I will have you both roll a willpower difficulty 5. As you enter
Permanent or temp?
Permanent.
What's the difficulty again?
5. Alright, 3 successes from Elined, none from Robert. Make a roll. Robert, as you're entering this city, fortunately you are in a covered carriage, because what happens to you is obviously unnatural. You feel your fangs extend. There's a pain that sears through you. There's something about this city which is more than uncomfortable. You actually feel your hand begin to burn a bit as you start to become worried about this feeling. It seems to build, and you take 3 levels of bashing.
Am I able to visibly see the damage?
Oh, it's obvious. You can see a bit of sizzle. He's obviously in pain as you're sitting across from him.
Okay, she gets the look of concern over her face. Goes, is there something the matter?
Something about this place.
We can always turn around. Your contact can meet you in the other city when you send word for them.
Yes, I cannot remain here for long.
Alright, she will give word to her to their driver.
Robert, you feel that as you endure these wounds, once you pass through the gate, the active burning of it starts to subside. It's as though you passed through a kind of wall of fire that you've survived, or perhaps a wall of burning water. And on the other end, you are still uncomfortable. You still feel the pain, but you don't feel like it's actively burning anymore, like you've passed through some kind of perimeter.
Robert examines his wounds as he starts to knit his flesh. Did you not feel that too?
There was something, but no, I did not. I was not harmed. Not like that.
Curious. Yes, let's get lodging, as I'm certain my agent will be here shortly.
Your carriage continues on. Gertrude kind of opens this panel, wooden panel from the front. Is everything quite all right, my lady? I thought I heard something.
It's all right. It's more of a matter of us not going to remain in this city for very long.
Well, as you say. And she closes the panel. And so you make your way. The carriage continues on. At various points you seem a little bit more anxious, and sometimes it goes away. I shouldn't say that. It never fully goes away. It just seems to ebb and flow to tolerable to only barely tolerable. Although the burning sensation does not return, you're never truly comfortable in your skin here. You're brought to an inn, and lodgings are prepared as your carriage is taken down, your belongings set up. Gertrude sees about seeing to most of this. So the two of you...
Elined
Go ahead.
keeps an eye on Robert just in case.
No need to give me that look now. I'm feeling much better.
Good. How long do you think we are staying here?
It depends on what news my agent has. And Robert will use summon.
Alright. And given that you're familiar enough with this, it could take days or nights depending on how far away he is. But you begin using it. Does that require a roll? I think it just activated.
I recall a roll.
Let's see, I should have it right here. You will be... There it is. Spend a blood point. You'll be rolling your Charisma Subterfuge. Your difficulty will be 4. Alright, you feel your blood. It doesn't burn when you use it, but it's definitely a strange sensation. It tickles and pricks at the inside of your skin in an unnatural way. You definitely feel it's successful. You have that feeling in your gut that it's working. It's just here everything about your vitae seems to be out of place. But you're certain with how much command you have over it that he should be to you very soon.
I do not think it will take long.
Good.
In the meantime, shall we get something to drink?
Do you think that is wise in this city? With what it has already done?
I suppose better not do anything too unholy.
I will have you both make an intelligence politics roll, standard difficulty. It's about your general knowledge of Canterbury you've acquired over the last century. Alright, 2 successes from both. So you both know that obviously this city is very holy, and you know that that is probably why not many Canaanites make home here. But you are aware that Elysium is held at the convent hospital of St. Thomas the Martyr, which is on the eastern side of the city. And you would also know that hunting here, all religious buildings, all the chapels and churches, and the cathedral are sacrosanct. There's no hunting allowed in any building, any house of God. Not that you could actually approach the cathedral, but the churches you could possibly get into, and you are aware that you cannot hunt there. So you know where Elysium is, and you know where you cannot hunt.
But if you intend to risk it after what has already happened, I will not stop you. I could very well just be overly cautious in this matter.
With that said, I think I'll curb my appetite.
Alright, with the city of Canterbury in front of you, where do the two of you go?
Robert's intent on waiting for his ghoul to arrive.
Alright. So you're going to remain put at the inn?
That's his current plan.
And Elined is waiting with him?
Yes.
Okay. We will fade the scene on the two of you waiting at the inn for now, waiting for Robert's ghoul to return. We will check in again. Following Thomas and Cormac, as they make their way from their treasonous meeting to see the Prince of Dublin, Edward de Warenne. So, uninterrupted at this time, you return again back on the streets that you were heading towards, and you make your way, Cormac leading the way, of course, back into town and towards the manor that you recall Prince Edward de Warenne holding. At least he did some decades ago. The manor you find is not as esteemed or extravagant as some of those in London. It's certainly no palace. It's perhaps even a bit more humble than Thomas's manor estate. And so it does have a man stationed at the gate, and you are escorted in. You're brought inside to a manor house, a couple stories tall, made of brick and wooden roofing. And you're brought into what you believe is the Great Hall, although the ceilings aren't quite as excessively high. And there you find a man, probably mid-30s, and of short, dark black hair, who seems to be reading over some scrolls. And you recognize Edward de Warenne, the Prince, Cormac. And he looks up briefly and then looks back to his scrolls. And he does a double look back up to the two of you and stands up in a start. Cormac de Courcy, is that you?
Yes, it's me. How are you doing, Prince de Warenne?
Just good to see you. And he comes forward to grasp your forearm.
And Cormac grasps back.
You are a good sight. These are not great times. And he looks over to Thomas.
Thomas will offer a hand out.
He looks down and seems to recognize the ring. Ah, my lord. Welcome to my humble city. I am Prince de Warenne. He smiles charmingly. Hadn't thought to seen you back here, Cormac, not after your appointment. Or should I say, Lord de Courcy.
No formalities, please.
For either of us, if it's all the same.
He smiles. I'm glad to hear it. Even as I am getting in on years, I could never get on with the titles and such. Take a seat. He pulls out a couple chairs.
Cormac will gladly take a seat.
Since he's yet to be introduced, Tom will speak up. Thomas Chamberlain. Tom, if you'd like.
Pleasure to meet you, Tom. What are the two you doing here? Quite an esteemed couple you make.
Tom smirks a bit. You have no idea.
Cormac gives Thomas a long look.
He kind of looks between the two of you waiting for an answer.
Tom just kind of stands there, or sits there waiting for Cormac to explain. He's your prince.
Well, I'm not quite sure how I want to phrase it.
I'll just spit it out.
Have you heard of the turmoil in England?
Aye. Ships come in every day. Hear a little bit more of it each night. It's a fiery mess over there.
More so than you can imagine. Murder, betrayal, wars over territory. Feels like old Ireland all over again.
He forgot to mention the old blood feuds coming to the fore.
He smirks.
Yes, let's not forget the blood feuds.
Sometimes I curse the way my sire treats me. Other times I'm glad to be not on that side of the water.
As for why we're here now, I'm afraid our business is not so pleasant.
Oh, gotten into troubles, have you?
Do you remember the old legend of the Witch of the Connaught?
His face grows from playful and cheerful to much more sober. I do. Why would you bring that up?
I don't think I've ever told you this before, but she's not a legend. I've met her.
Bullshit, you have. You wouldn't be standing here if you did.
See, that's the rub of it. I made a deal with her. A deal that cost me my house.
He looks at you with great interest.
And now something has happened in England that reminds me too much of the things I saw. Too much to be coincidence.
What are you talking about, Cormac?
I have reason to believe that if it wasn't the witch herself, it was one of her ilk who laid low Prince de Martinique.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph. All those stories I heard. He kind of sits back in his chair and thought, you really think that?
I do. I see no other possibility. Oh, but if I did, don't you believe I'd latch onto it?
Well, if that's the case, mate, I'll stay the fuck out of the Connaught.
What did he say? I'm sorry.
He told you to stay the fuck out of the Connaught.
I made that deal long ago as well. But unfortunately, I might have to renege on that deal.
Cormac, if even half of those stories are true, you're walking into a death sentence.
Maybe so. Or maybe she'll remember me. Which in itself may not be a good thing. And he attempts to grin, though it's forced.
Edward looks unconvinced.
Master Chamberlain here was kind enough to come with me. Maybe to assuage his own curiosity.
I won't lie, there were a few ulterior motives. I understand there's ripe shipping industry coming in to Dublin. I thought I might make a bid.
What, so you can exploit us too? He folds his
Damn.
arms.
Damn that. I pay market rates.
You'll have to take it up with my sire. Ireland's rich in its resources, but it won't be that way forever. And I'm certainly not seeing any of it. He has something of a monopoly over here. Well, almost.
Don't tell me. The worshipful company Mercers.
Aye. How'd you guess?
There's something of a burr in their soul.
Well, if I know my sire, I'm sure he'll have that one too.
Wouldn't ask much. Just permission to dock a ship every other month.
You've got
You
my
let-
permission, mate. It's not mine you're gonna be needing.
So far as I understand it, Prince Barbaros's influence over me and my dealings ends at the Irish.
But his influence over my dealings extend to Dublin.
You let me worry about the particulars. I promise not to step on your toes, or have it traced back to you.
You're a friend of Cormac's, I trust your word. As for this business with the witch, you say you saw her. You saw something at least. I would say if you can think of any other reason, any reason at all to not go over there. Even the Kine and the Connacht are different.
I imagine they're the kind who sleep with their own sisters.
If you're lucky.
There's still time to talk myself out of it.
He nods. Well, there's not much of a court here, per se. So, if you're looking for intrigue and sorts, you probably won't be finding much of it. Not many Canaanites making their home here these nights.
Never were, and I've always loved it that way.
He nods. It is nice to have some quiet.
I'm glad the trouble is abated and have not yet reached this far.
In ways they have, but perhaps not the ways that you've been seeing yourself.
I'm going to ask you a question that might anger you, and I'm sorry. What do you know of your sire's feud with the Prince Ragnar?
Give me one moment. I know a bit. I know the two of them were in some coterie centuries ago. along with my uncle, Kenwolf, and another one, Ethelred, I believe his name was. Guess they had some kind of falling out after this Ethelred didn't fare so well.
Cormac nodded solemnly.
As I hear it, my sire was given a city by the old lord, Adam, and Ragnar wasn't. I suppose that was the beginning of it, but who can say?
So jealousy fueled it, at least at first.
I wasn't there, mate. Who knows what else went on?
I'm afraid if you haven't heard it already, you will. Barbaros and Ragnar have to come to blows.
He sits back in his chair, his eyes a bit wide, looking off in thought. Jesus. So it's happening then. I wondered for a while. Suppose it's about time.
At the meeting of the Covenant Princes, it came to a head. We tried our best to have both of them party. Only Ragnar was willing.
That's not surprising. My sire's not been ever much for friendly words. Not even with me.
We've noticed.
I can't say I'm going to lose much sleep over this. Might even end up a little bit better of it. All the same, appreciate you letting me know.
I'm sure it comes from someone you trust.
He nods, smiling again.
That's actually the other reason we were in Dublin. The Covenant is seeking allies further afield should these two come to violence. It's a conflict for you, I understand. But again, we would seek your permission to seek aid.
Not as much of a conflict as you might think. I wouldn't mind Barbaros being knocked down a peg or two. You have the run of the pale. And he kind of extends outward, broadly.
Well, thank you for that.
Well, if that's all, boys, there's a couple of things I was going to do tonight.
That would be all on my side, Thomas.
Thought I might offer to help. Looks like you're going over a bit of numbers.
Aye, none of them pretty.
Mind a hand.
Why not? He says after a few moments. Be willing to admit I'm not the best at finances here. Not what you might call a merchant.
As it happens, and he'll quirk a bit of a smile. Not exactly my father's son, but I get by.
No, that's true. You're not your father's son at all. And he shares a private smile.
And Tom will glance over the ledgers, see what he can root out, if he can find any ways to creatively shift the numbers, maybe turn out a little extra operating.
Sure, give me quick intelligence, commerce, difficulty 7. One success. You do find a couple areas where there's some inefficient management of some of his accounts, and you find a few ways to consolidate things where he ends up saving actually quite a bit of silver. If not the difference of fortunes, but it's noticeable to him, and he's obviously impressed. And you make a good mark by pointing this out and helping him with the numbers here, number crunching.
It won't turn your sword into plowshares, but at least you'll be able to breathe a little easier.
That's a good mate you have, Cormac. Keep him close. He'll make you rich.
Aye, if my ambitions fell that way. He is quite good at what he does. And I dare say a fair merchant. It's hard to find these days.
He nods. Well, welcome to Dublin, boys. I'm late to an appointment, but I'm sure I'll see you around the city. And he smiles, kind of clasping each of your shoulders in turn.
Tom will give a nod.
And then he makes his way out.
Now, about that bite.
Well, we've been given an engraved invitation, haven't we?
Lower of the Pale.
Let's go make some young maidens squeal.
And then we can go get some blood.
And he'll clap you on the shoulder. Maybe harder than he meant to. Not that it hurts your armor-like flesh.
Tom will chuckle good-naturedly and rise to join.
Alright. And the scene fades on the two of you departing Edward de Warren's manor back into the streets of Dublin. And at that, we will end the scene and end this session, as we are at 9 o'clock, and we will pick it up again next week. Good game. Oh wow, how long was I muted?
From at that.
Really? Okay. Well,
Yep.
we will end the scene and end the session, and we will pick it up again next week. Good game.
Indeed.
Y'all are doing some treason.
Yay, treason.
Just a tiny bit of treason.
Hey, Elined didn't do any treason yet.
But you talked about treason.
True. But not this session.
What is treason?
No one expects the Treason Inquisition.
Did you say heresy?
Let us do some entertaining role players. We'll start with Elined.
I'm gonna give that to Robert for falling back into his way.
That's a good description. Robert.
I'm going to give that to Cormac for just almost enraging Barbaros.
Cool. And Cormac.
I'm giving it to Robert for revealing his scales yet again.
And Tom.
I'm gonna give it to Cormac. Because we're getting into some shit here. He's being, like, the best antagonist to Tom.
Excellent. Alright. 2 experience all around. Definitely advancing some major arcs here. And
I finally have enough to get my last obtenebration level.
Ooh.
I can now turn into a cloud of shadow.
Ooh.
That's
And
awesome.
run away from places.
Scary.
Told you, the soul is black as night.
Oh, make sure you send that into a text message, like a DM on Discord, or I'm gonna forget it. That goes for everybody.
Okay.
If you spend experience, just send it to me in a message, so I remember.
That is why I haven't been spending forever. I was trying to get enough for that last level.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there you go. Cool. Good game. Looking forward to next game. We'll talk to you guys throughout the week.